now. And I'll send these or have someone send this to you on my behalf after the training is over. Welcome, everyone. My name is Alina Harborn, and I'll give you some more information about myself, but John would like to open with what, I forget, was it a poem or?
It's a meditation. I want to, excuse me, Paul, I'm going to read the note from Henry Nouwen that Carol Galbraith sent us. I thought it was particularly poignant and meaningful. So I'm going to begin with this opening meditation, and then we'll let Lena take it away. This is called Create Space for the Stranger. In our world full of strangers, estranged from their own past, culture, and country, from their neighbors, friends, and family, from their deepest self and their God, we witness a painful search for a hospitable place where life can be lived without fear, where community can be found. Although many, we may say even most, strangers in this world become easily the victim of a fearful hostility, it is possible for men and women, obligatory for Christians, to offer an open, hospitable space where strangers can cast off their strangeness and become our fellow human being. The movement from hostility to hospitality is hard and full of difficulties. Our society seems to be increasingly full of fearful, defensive, aggressive people, anxiously clinging to their property, inclined to look at their surrounding world with suspicion, always expecting an enemy to suddenly appear, intrude, do harm. But still, it is our vocation to convert the hostis to the hospice, the enemy into the guest, to create the free and fearless space where brotherhood and sisterhood can be formed and fully experienced. Henry Nouwen, I don't know when he wrote it, he's been dead a long time, but those words struck me as awfully poignant for us today in 2022, and really moving to me. Anyway, so I'm going to shut up now and let Alina take it away. Thank you.
All right, great. Well, we'll get started, and just to give you a brief overview of what to expect, we are going to have this training be interactive. So as we go along, we'll look at a presentation, and periodically throughout, we'll go into breakout rooms so you can have discussions in small groups of 4 or 5 people, because it'll be more interesting for you if you get to talk in addition to having only me talking. So we'll also take a short break around the middle. So if you need water or anything, please feel free at any time to do it, but we'll also have a break to do that as well. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. And we'll take a look at the presentation. All right, can you see my PowerPoint? I cannot.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Okay,
We're
great.
all muted.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, perfect. All right, so today will be the first 3 modules of the 9 total modules. It will be about an hour and a half long, and we'll have a time for questions after each module. But if you would like to ask a question during, that's fine too. Also, when we finish at 3:30, I will stay longer for anyone who has even more questions. So let's take a look at the first module, which is called Introductions and Expectations. These are also the other modules you'll see in the other trainings. So first, I'll introduce myself. As I said, my name is Alina Harborn. I'm the Refugee Sponsorship Coordinator at JFCS. Before this position, I was a teacher. I taught English as a second language for many years. I have my Master of Education degree from Boston University. I taught abroad in South Korea and in Costa Rica. I also taught in Pittsburgh, including adult immigrants and refugees. And I also have taught children in other places. Some of you may know my boss, who's the director of our department. Her name is Yvonne Smith Tapia. You may hear from her as you go through the sponsorship process. So for this first module, I will tell you a little bit about JFCS. JFCS has multiple departments, and my department is the Department of Refugee and Immigrant Services. But we'll work in collaboration with the other departments. For example, the food pantry can help donate food to the refugees we work with. You might hear me refer to them as our clients. The legal services department helps a lot with our clients as well, but any of these could also be involved. I'll give you a little bit of background on JFCS's history. So JFCS has sort of a winding path through history. You can trace it back to various groups that merged together. One of these first groups that was a predecessor to JFCS was called the Hebrew Ladies Aid Society. This is a photo taken of them in the 1870s. And JFCS in its current form has been doing resettlement work for many years, for I think the past 80 years or so. And here are just a few photos of JFCS and some of their resettlement work. So this was a class, this is a citizens class, a citizenship class, and I think, was this one? Yes, this is an English as a second language class in this photo. So now it's important to say that despite JFCS having such a long history, the sponsorship program is new. We're just starting it. So we have one sponsor group that has already been matched with a family that they're sponsoring, and your group would likely be the second group to be matched with a family. So let's start. I think we won't do a breakout room for these two questions, but anyone who wants to answer can unmute. Why do you think JFCS has started the sponsorship program? Or same question worded a different way, what are the benefits of sponsorship?
Well, I guess we just want to share the load of all the work that you guys have to do, and it's very difficult to settle a family. So you know for sure if you get a sponsor, they're going to be taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Elena, can I answer a slightly different question?
Sure.
Because yeah, I think I know the answer to that, but I think the reason you're doing it is to give us Presbyterians a chance to do what we're supposed to be doing. And this is, going back to what I just read from Henry Nouwen. This is why we're here, guys, right? You've been listening from the pulpit message from Gilchrist for many years, and now Joe and Louise today talking about outreach. This is what we're here for. And I think this was God's, playing a little joke, having the Jewish folks be the ones to show us the way.
So you're right. There's so many benefits to this program, and I'll tell you a few more. Refugees who in other cities and other locations have been sponsored, they've reported feeling more welcome in their communities and feeling welcome more quickly as well. It also helps the communities that they resettle in feel more acceptance towards diversity. And for measurable outcomes outside of how they feel, it helps refugees find job opportunities more quickly. It helps them find more job opportunities overall and have the ability to earn higher salaries as well. It also helps them learn English more quickly, learn how to navigate various important areas of life, such as housing. And also, as I think you already touched on, it helps make meaningful connections between the sponsored family and the sponsors themselves. And finally, it also promotes cultural exchanges. So great. I'm going to share my screen again.
Excuse me, Alina. Is JFCS primarily a Pittsburgh organization or a national one, or?
Yeah, good question. It is a Pittsburgh agency, but we partner with the national agency. And I'll show you both of those actually. You accurately predicted what we're going to be talking about next.
Glad to be of service.
Sure. All right. So I'll actually go back to these questions because I want to answer the question we were just talking about. So JFCS stands for Jewish Family and Community Services, and that is just in Pittsburgh. But our clients that we serve through our department can live anywhere in Allegheny County, and technically they can live up to 100 miles away from our agency. We try not to place them that far away because it's just harder for us to serve them. But the national agency that we're partnered with is called HIAS. It stands for Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. And you'll find that Jewish organizations have a long history of helping immigrants. And we're also partnered with the US government, who does background checks, for example, and the United Nations, which is the group that identifies refugees and can help them make those first steps in the process of finding a safe home. So now I'll go back to these questions. So first, our first discussion that I'd like us to have is, why are you here? What interested you in volunteering with this sponsor group? Why is it important to you to volunteer in this area? And also, what about you do you think will be most helpful as you take on this project? It could be work experience, a personality trait, it could be anything about yourself. So start to think about that. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to put those questions in the chat box so you can look at them. And also, I'm going to put you in breakout rooms. So I'm sure many of you are already familiar with breakout rooms, but if you're not, I think something will pop up on your screen, and just hit accept. So I'm going to create the room now, and I'll give you 5 minutes to discuss. I'll pop into each room to see if everyone's doing okay. So here we go. Hi, Carolyn. It looks like you might be frozen. Oh, there she goes. Okay. Okay, I'm going to join the breakout rooms. For anyone watching the recording, it will be boring on the recording for the next 5 minutes until we all come back. So see you soon. Hello, welcome back. So everyone has about 60 seconds to leave the room. So I think people will start popping back in over the next maybe 30 seconds or so. Hello, welcome back. So as people start to come back from talking in their groups, does anyone want to share anything they learned about the others in their discussion group? Anything interesting about how they, why they want to volunteer, or anything interesting about their personal skills that they think will help them?
Being recorded.
Another Roberta.
I got to admit, I looked at the list of categories and I felt very inadequate on most of the thinking. Well, I don't have a lot to add on that one or that one. So looking forward to learning things.
Great. Well, I got to pop into all the rooms and I heard a lot of great skills that people can bring to the table, a lot of wonderful perspectives. So let me go share my screen again very briefly. So we're going to go to the next discussion points. What preconceptions do you or others have about refugees? What expectations do you have? And how can preconceptions and expectations be either helpful or harmful? So I'll copy and paste this in the chat box. As you start thinking about it, we'll go back into the same discussion groups as before. I'll give you 5 minutes again, and this time we'll spend some time chatting about it afterwards. So let me copy and paste that for you. And we'll go in breakout rooms. So here we go. See you soon. Oh, hi, Carol. Sorry, let me assign you to a room. I'm going to assign you to breakout room 2.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, welcome back. So it looks like some of the people are still discussing their last thoughts before they return. So we'll give them about 30 seconds and then they'll be here as well. I got to pop in and listen to all the groups. It was great to hear all the discussion. Hello, welcome back. All right, I think everyone should be here in just a moment. All right, great. All right, I think everyone's back. All right, would anyone like to share any of the main points their group talked about?
We mentioned the fact that we don't speak the language of the people who we're likely to be picking up at the airport. And how do we handle the lack of language with these people?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. It's great you're thinking ahead about that. So the training for next session is going to start with interpretation and communication. So we'll practice the best practices for using an interpreter, both an in-person interpreter and an interpreter over the phone. Because while it's wonderful to have an in-person interpreter, sometimes it's not possible. So then the phone interpreter is a good backup. And we'll also talk about some useful tools that are available, like Google Translate, that can help with many languages, although not all, if they speak a very rare language. So great, good question. Thanks for sharing. Does anyone else want to share something their group talked about?
Yeah, our group talked about a book that's very helpful. It's called A Beginner's Guide to America. And then a movie. Was it The Big Lie? Was that what was talked about, Barbara? You're muted. It was, you're muted, Barbara.
It's The Good Lie, I think.
The Good Lie. Anyway, there's stories about people entering the country in the way this family will.
Yeah, Barbara, you're still muted.
We were talking about all that in terms of culture and our ability to understand what the cultural experience is of people from another country who might not automatically experience our culture and know, you know, what is appropriate and not appropriate. And I know that's one of your training sessions to talk about that kind of thing.
Yeah, you're right. Well, wonderful. That's great. And some other information that I think I heard various groups mention are that some of the refugees may have been on camps, some for as long as 20 years, whereas others, like most of the refugees from Afghanistan, were waiting on military bases instead. So there's a real range of experience that they had prior to coming here. As far as backgrounds, some of them had very high prestige jobs like doctor, journalist in the past, whereas others might not have many skills that they can transfer here. They might be looking for jobs that are lower prestige in their home country or here as well. So it sounded like everyone got to talk about a lot of
I can't imagine the hugeness of the loss that must be experienced in that situation.
That's true.
Loss of everything that you've had and all that has been familiar.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
separated from other family and stuff a lot of the time too.
Yeah.
True. Part of the training we'll talk about what we call trauma-informed care. So it's great you're already thinking about that because it's definitely extremely important. Thank you for sharing what you spoke about in your groups. I'm going to present once more, and we'll be wrapping up module 1 pretty shortly. So I'll just give you the technical definition for a refugee. You can read it yourself here if you like, but basically it's someone that was forced to flee their home for safety reasons. And once they flee to a safe refuge, they have three choices. The first is voluntary repatriation. That means they safely return home when it's safe to do so. This is the first option because it has the highest possibility of success. They already know their own culture, so that's ideal if possible, but sometimes it doesn't become safe for a long time, in which case they have option 2, which is integration. Wherever the refugee camp is will be in another country. They could decide to stay in that country, move out of the refugee camp and integrate into that country. That's the second choice because usually the surrounding countries have more similarities in culture than countries farther away. And the third option, which is what all of the refugees will have chosen who come here, is resettlement. And this is the last option because usually there are large cultural barriers that makes it more difficult for them to feel long-term that they are welcome in the area. So we already talked about this, but I'll just reiterate that there's multiple players in the role of a refugee moving from the place they escaped from to the camp to here in Pittsburgh. And they're all there to help ensure that there are background checks completed for the refugees to keep everyone safe here. And also JFCS and HIAS require background checks on behalf of the sponsors to ensure the safety of the refugees. And I'll give you a brief overview of what resettlement looks like. Resettlement, which can be done by Jewish Family and Community Services or other similar agencies. There's also in Pittsburgh an agency called Hello Neighbor, Bethany Christian. There's a few resettlement agencies that are local. They help provide refugees with everything that they'll need to get a good start in their new home. So that can run from everything from helping them find housing to enrolling the kids in school and connecting them to additional resources other than what's listed here. And I heard someone already mentioned SHIM. There's many partners around Pittsburgh and Allegheny County that work with JFCS to help us with various things, including resettlement. For example, Literacy Pittsburgh is our partner who they teach all of our refugees who need ESL. We sign them up through Literacy Pittsburgh. So this is the end of module 1. So I have 2 quick quiz questions for you. What can you as sponsors expect from the individual or family that you will be matched with? And anyone can answer.
I suspect we will get a lot of surprises.
Good answer. Yes, you are correct. Really, that's the only thing you can expect, that you will have lots of surprises. Because even though there are things that are common, there's always things that you don't expect as well. Okay, quiz question 2. What can your match, and by match I mean the family you sponsor, what can they expect from you as sponsors?
Both a welcoming and and some practical help.
Great. Yes, you are correct. So excellent work. I'm going to share in the chat box now a link. I will also email this to you or have someone email on my behalf. If you click on it, I think you should be able to view it. If you cannot click on it now, don't worry, it's not necessary. But I'm sharing it with you now because it includes all of the information for Module 2 about the different committees. It includes a description of each committee. Because Module 2 will be about the committees more in depth, you can refer to this document. So we'll start Module 2 and then we'll take a break a little bit in the middle there. Okay,
Uh,
I think I hear a question maybe. Any questions before? Oh, I forgot to ask you. Do you have questions about Module 1 before we begin Module 2? All right. If you think of questions later, that's fine. So let's get started. Let me share my PowerPoint again. All right, so Module 2 is about the overview of services of what sponsors will be providing to the sponsored family. We're going to start off by talking about clearances. I think some of you may have already heard about this in one of the informational meetings, but just in case you didn't, everyone who will have direct contact with the family will need all of their clearances. And there are 3 that are necessary. Those are the PA child abuse clearance. That's online and free. It's usually, I would say it's usually immediate or within a few days. There's also the PA criminal history record check, which is also online and free. It should also be either immediate or within a few days normally. Then there's the FBI fingerprint background check. This one, you'll have to schedule an appointment with something like Identigo. That's a third party that helps do these fingerprints. Oops, sorry. And then you'll go in, they'll actually take a scan of your fingerprints, and that's around $23. And that usually takes 2 weeks or so, but it's come faster for some, and some it's taken much longer. So I would recommend starting that one early. And if you would like to drive anyone in the family, we would ask for your 10-year driving history. This is also online. It's also immediate. It's $12. And I can send you or provide you with detailed instructions for each of these. And I believe some of the point people for the group already may have shared this. So
Yelena, can I just, this is John, can I just interject something real quickly? We have sent out their detailed instructions with links to websites for all these things. If you haven't gotten them, reach out to me or the Connollys or Susan, and we'll get you those instructions. I got them originally from JFCS, and they're very detailed and thorough, and frankly, pretty easy to follow. So let us know. We'll get them to you.
Great, thank you.
I have a quick question. Did you say 10-year driving history?
Yes.
Or, oh, it's 10-year, because we applied for 3 years, so I guess we need to redo that then.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. There's an exception. If the person is a new driver and they don't have a 10-year history, then the 3-year would suffice.
Okay, we didn't understand that, so I guess we should just redo that then.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We'd have to repay the $12.50.
Unfortunately, I believe so. Yes. Thank you. Good question. Okay. So now let's talk about what services JFCS will provide, because this is a partnership with the sponsorship group, and which the sponsors will provide, and which JFCS and the sponsors would provide together as a collaborative project. This is in that packet that I shared with you in the chat box. So don't worry if I click to proceed before you've read it in depth. This will be shared with you in writing. But let's just take a look at the first section together. Pre-arrival services means what we do before the family lands in the airport. So the goal, if possible, is to find housing before the family arrives. And it's a big task, but it can be done. And if it doesn't happen, don't worry. We can find temporary housing until the permanent housing is secured. This is something JFCS will work with you as the sponsorship group to do. So you have local connections. John has already told me some details about this, which is great. JFCS has a housing specialist. He can help provide information to the landlords about what will be different about renting to a refugee versus someone who's not a refugee. Then once a home is identified, JFCS, our housing specialist, will come and he'll make sure it looks safe. This just means he'll go through a checklist, and it says everything you might expect. Like, there are no broken windows, there's no peeling lead paint, there's no mold or rats in the house, just basic safety stuff. And then the sponsor would furnish the home. You could do this by having people donate used furniture that's in good condition. We have a list of the mandated items that must be in the home, but it's pretty much what you would expect. For example, a kitchen table with 1 chair per family member, a sofa for the family, beds for each person. The beds cannot be donated due to a fear of, or a desire to avoid bed bugs at all costs, but all the other furniture can be donated. So you'll see here that every single service we offer is designated as something JFCS and the sponsor will do together. The sponsor will do alone, or JFCS will do alone. And you can refer to that link for more details. It's in a table. And there's also timelines that we can use to make sure we're providing the services in a way that's most helpful. So in addition to, here, let me go back. Before they arrive, the day of arrival, the next day, we have these different timelines to meet to make sure everything is going in a way that will help the family get used to their new home. So that includes very quickly, they'll be enrolled with employment services. That's at our agency. We have a team who will help them start looking for jobs. Within 30 days, the children should be enrolled in school so they can start learning English, meeting new friends, so they aren't falling farther behind than they have to at school. And then the last time marker here is 90 days. That's because the first 90 days are by far the most busy. So much happens. After 90 days, the main thing that will happen is continued cultural orientation. As they learn more about living in America, they'll start to think of new questions, and their sponsors can help them find answers to those questions. And I know that the point people for the group have already provided a lot of information about the structure, which JFCS recommends, and that is breaking the group, which often will average around 30 people, into different committees. And this will just help give structure and help break down the tasks into a way that is more manageable and less overwhelming. And I think there are already some people volunteering to be leaders of the different committees. So I'll just quickly give you an overview of each committee. These committees are flexible. This is the generic structure we recommend to everyone. Your organization may want to change it slightly to fit itself better. So the administrative committee basically takes care of all the paperwork. They make sure the clearances are done. They make sure all the other committees have what they need to function. I'll go through these very quickly because they're also written in that packet, and I want to give you a chance to discuss. The financial committee can help raise the funds or acquire the funds. They can help teach the family how to budget. They can also keep track of disbursement of the funds. The welcome committee, this is usually a popular one because it's pretty fun. You get to meet the family at the airport. You get to bring them weather appropriate clothing. So if they're coming from Tanzania, they aren't walking outside in flip-flops. So you'll bring shoes, coats if necessary. They'll also help bring the culturally appropriate hot meal. And that just means if it's a Muslim family, you would find a meal with halal meat, or it could be any dietary restriction for any other religion. Housing committee, pretty straightforward. They'll help find housing. They'll help with the utilities. They'll help going forward, the family understand how to work with the landlord, which they may not be familiar with. The education committee will help the adults enroll in ESL, the children enroll in school, and if they're younger children, they can help enroll them in programs like Head Start. The medical committee, this one's optional. JFCS has medical caseworkers, but if there are people with a medical background, and I think I heard that there were, they can definitely help teach the adults in the family to navigate the healthcare system. That would be very helpful to them. And if there are people without this background, they always appreciate drivers to take them to the appointments. The appointments will have interpreters there, so really it would just be driving for some of those. The employment committee can help contact businesses that might be willing to hire refugees. And if it seems like a good fit, they can help with the process of applying, with creating a resume, completing applications, etc. And the cultural orientation committee will help teach the family how to adjust to life in the US. And there are mandated topics that this committee must cover. I'll explain to you those requirements in more depth. We'll have another module that focuses on cultural orientation specifically. But there are also many other topics that are not mandated that could still be helpful. For example, how to go shopping at a supermarket. We are not required to teach the family this, but as you can imagine, it's so helpful. And it might be overwhelming for them the first few times they go. So the cultural orientation committee would take care of things of that nature. So, oops, sorry. So we're going to take a few minutes, just a short time, to discuss which committee or area you're most interested in. Some of you probably already know, some of you might have a good idea, some of you might not know at all. That's okay. This is just a time to share which you're interested in and why. And after we finish discussing that, we'll take our break. So I'll put you back in your break rooms. And I think we'll do a shorter one this time. Let's do 3 minutes and then we'll come back and discuss. So I'll see you in 3 minutes. Oh, looks like you might be frozen, Carolyn. I think might move you in a minute. And hi, Fred's iPhone. I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, oh. Okay, I think Carolyn's frozen, so I'm gonna go check on the rooms. Just set a timer. welcome back. So I think everyone will be here in about 5 seconds or so.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, welcome back. Would anyone like to share anything that came up during the discussion group? And does anyone want to share a sense of, do most people know where they want to go, or are most people still thinking about it?
One of the things that came up, and my wife and I have been thinking about, selecting a particular committee, but I think maybe some of us have skill sets more appropriate in other committee areas. And what are our opportunities to crisscross over different committees to be helpful where our expertise may be well used?
Oh, that's a really good question. I would say that each sponsorship group could decide that for themselves. I can share that the other sponsor group, which has already started, Oakmont Presbyterian, they have several people serving on more than one committee. And I think it would be great to pull people in from different committees as you go along. I'm sure as you begin, you'll find that it could be helpful to make some changes. So I think that would be pretty good to have it be flexible. Yeah, but as a group, you could decide what you thought would work best. So great.
No, Alina, one of the things that I think Paul did is to put together a list of drivers. And I think that would be very, very helpful, because if there's something comes up last minute, we're just going to have to send out like a text or whatever and just say, we need help and who can do this today. I mean, I foresee that. Maybe it's not going to happen, but
No, that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good idea.
I'm willing to be a driver when I'm available. I've got a Jeep pickup with a back seat and a bed, and I've got the driver's form, whatever it was, and put it on the website.
It's great.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, well, going forward, feel free to think more about the committees. There's no rush. I'll share one last thing before we take our break. And it is this. So, sorry, my computer is loading slowly. So this graphic is meant to represent the sponsorship group on the left with all the different committees, and JFCS on the right with our team who works on resettlement. So for JFCS, that means refugee caseworkers. Each client is assigned a caseworker when they first arrive. We also have an employment team who focuses solely on employment. Our housing specialist focuses just on housing. We also have a caseworker supervisor. And in addition, we have benefits and medical caseworkers who focus on just those two things. So to keep the lines of communication clear, we request that everyone on the different committees update everything they do to the co-sponsor point person or point people. For example, Oakmont Church decided that they would have 4 point people, which I think is a really nice number, because then if one has to go away, another can step in, and they will always know what's going on. So if anyone from one committee needs to know what's going on in another committee, they can all ask the point person or point people and get up-to-date information. That point person or point people will share that with me, and I will in turn share it with my team, and vice versa. My team will share anything with me that the sponsors would have to know. And last question for module 2. Once you start volunteering, once your sponsorship becomes official, who should you ask questions to first? And also why? I didn't say why, but I'd like to hear what you think.
Might get it wrong, but to the point person.
Yeah, our point person.
Yes.
Yes, you are correct. Yes. And this is because once the sponsorship program is up and running with 3 or more groups, that means we'll have 90 plus members of the sponsorship group, and it would get a little too crazy having so many people coordinating with just me. And I want to make sure I answer all your questions very quickly because sometimes they're very urgent. So excellent work. We're going to take a 5-minute break and then we'll do module 3, which I think is my favorite module. So it's about 3:01. At 3:06, you can come back and we'll start again. I'll be here. So if anyone wants to ask questions on the break, feel welcome to.
So we have to redo our driver's thing.
Alina,
think-
one practical question.
Sure.
I assume when you say beds can't be reused, you really mean mattresses, right? So if somebody has a bed frame, can that be reused?
Unfortunately, it includes not only the mattress, but also a box spring, the bed frame,
Oh,
and
yeah.
the yes.
Wow, that's changed over the years. Thank you. That clears that up.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, it's too bad because I know there's a lot of really nice bed frames out there. It's a shame we can't use them.
Or is there any kind of health insurance that refugees are able to get?
Yes, and really good question. So when they arrive, our medical caseworkers have them all set up with Medicaid.
Medicaid.
So, yes, so they'll all have that.
Okay, that's good.
Yes, it's good.
When you talked about medical services, I was wondering, Flo and I both have background in mental health backgrounds and professionally, and that wasn't mentioned, but I was wondering if the practical needs are so important first that that's not really attended to, or is it part of what you try to provide for people?
Yeah, great question. So if they would like help with anything related to counseling or therapy, we have a department at JFCS that offers those services.
That's great.
Yeah, it's really good. And if for whatever reason our department can't help them, we can refer them to others in the community who could help them. Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, how are the families selected in terms of how, for our group, how would that family be selected and why, I guess is the other question.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I throw some questions back at you now.
Sure. So our current process is our director of our department will assure a case. This means that the national organization, HIAS, will reach out to us about an individual or a family that is ready to resettle. And if we are able to accept that family, we will assure the case, which means she will say, yes, we have the capacity to help that family at this time. And that is just done based on our capacity. Do we have enough caseworkers to help the family? So it's just based purely on number of people we're already serving. As far as matching an individual or family with the sponsorship group, we don't know too much about the refugees before they arrive. So what we always know is how many there are in the family and their age. So it looks like this group is going to be probably around 30 people, which is a really good size. So we would try to find a family that would match the size of this group well. So I would say probably anywhere from 4 to 8 people in the family. If it were a smaller group, we would try to match them with a smaller family. And if it were a group with lots of people interested in education and experience working with children, we would probably try to find a family with children in it because they do need extra help. And if the group was equipped to help children, we would try to find a match that you could apply those skills. And then there could be other factors, but it would depend on each group. For example, Oakmont Presbyterian Church found a house with 2 bedrooms. So the size of the family had to fit in that 2-bedroom house. So and it doesn't have to work that way. Sometimes you could be matched with the family and later find the house. They just found the house first. And we were lucky enough to have a family of 4 arriving that fit in that house. So if there's any special circumstances, we would take that into account. What we cannot use to match is things like race, ethnicity, because we want to make sure it's equitable as possible. And our sponsors are so loving and accepting, it probably wouldn't be an issue, but just for that reason, we don't share the nationality of the family with the sponsors until after they have formally accepted the match. We would share the number of people in the family.
Now, you say you don't have a lot of detail on the people. Is that because of privacy laws, or would it be helpful to have a kind of a pre-checklist of the type, what you're dealing with in terms of education levels, language skills, those kinds of things ahead of time?
So they try to provide us with their languages, their education level, and their US tie, which means any family they have in the United States.
Right.
Or it could be a friend. Unfortunately, that information it's pretty common to have mistakes. For example, they might say, this adult woman attended school to the 5th grade, and then later we find out she did attend school to the 5th grade, but the school is in French and she doesn't speak French. So actually she didn't really learn while she was in those 5 years of school. Or it might say they have no US tie, and then at the airport we might meet a cousin who has heard they are arriving somehow and wasn't reported to us. So we do our best to find out as much as we can, but there are surprises that happen sometimes. So when we match the family with a sponsor, one of the major things I forgot to mention is if there's a US tie. If there's a US tie, we would try to not match that family with the sponsor because they already have someone in the US there to support them. We would like the sponsors to help someone who doesn't have that support already. Could a sponsor find a US tie arriving as a surprise? Definitely. But we would hope that it didn't happen. So that's really great. I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you have questions you didn't get a chance to ask me, don't worry. I'll stay after we finish as well. So I'll make sure to stay until all questions have been answered. Oops. And my computer's just a little bit slow. Okay, so now let's get started with Module 3, Cultural Considerations and Boundaries. We're going to start with this quote about cultural humility. So most people know about cultural awareness, cultural sensitivity, cultural competency, and you may or may not have heard about cultural humility. So let's take a look at this quote. I'll read it just in case there's anyone who can't see the screen very well. We learn about culture primarily not by learning facts of another's culture, but rather by changing our attitude. Our underlying openness to those who are culturally different is the key to cultural understanding. I'm going to give you a minute to think about that. And I'm going to also copy and paste that into the chat box so you have it. It should also be in that packet I sent you via link earlier. And we're going to go back into the discussion groups just to talk about your thoughts on this. So we'll make it pretty quick because we've got a lot to cover still. So I'll give you 3 minutes in the breakout room. So I'll see you soon. Hello, welcome back. Looks like everyone should be here in just a moment.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, great. Welcome back. Does anyone want to share any highlights of what they discussed in their discussion group?
Paul, you want to mention what you're saying about Haiti? I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, when we travel to Haiti, which is obviously a different culture from ours, there's a temptation as Americans, as who we are, to come to them and kind of do or teach and maybe in a more forceful way impose what we think ought to be done. And we tell ourselves again and again and again, that's not why we're there. We want to understand their culture. We want to be sensitive to that, to not do that, but rather to listen to what they have to say. So be attentive to their needs, to be attentive to who they are and where they're coming from. It's a challenge, but we try our best to do that. So we realize that folks coming here, it's a little different in as much as they're coming into our culture, and so we're trying to help them navigate life in the U.S., which could be quite different from what they're used to, and that's the kind of the learning aspect of it. But still, I'm sure they're going to want to find foods that they're familiar with, and find others that are that can become friends with that are from their own culture.
I would just recommend a book, and this is really about Americans going to another country, but I don't know if any of you ever read Barbara Kingsolver's The Poisonwood Bible. And this is a story about a family that they go and live in Africa, and all the ways they screw up by mostly just assuming that their way is the best way. And the cultural humility is something they had to learn the hard way. So anyway, it's worth reading.
Oh, great. Thank you for sharing. All right, I'm going to share my screen again. So thank you for your thoughts on cultural humility. And I completely agree that openness is more important than facts. That being said, I am going to just share a couple quick facts that might be helpful. So refugees can come from anywhere. They could have any religion. But one of the common religions that they might have that would be it would have some significant differences from the Presbyterian Church would be Islam. And if we have a Muslim family and you sponsor them, it would be important to find them halal food.
As halal as it'll go.
So this is Salam's Market. It's in the Strip District, and it has halal food. It has a lot of food. It's both a grocery store, a market, and a grill, so you can actually buy prepared meals. And this would have foods that would be appropriate for many of our families. We won't spend too much time, please, because I'm not sure where the family would be from. But one other important thing that would be important if the family was Muslim would be to learn a little bit about Ramadan, which is it's a holiday that's about a month long, during which Muslims fast during daylight hours. So it would be helpful during Ramadan if you didn't bring them food during the day, because they're also not supposed to smell it. So let's continue. I'm gonna skip this one. So the next few slides are all cultural scenarios. I'm going to actually put them in the chat box for you. They're also in the I apologize for my dog and the dog I'm babysitting. They're loud. So this is also in that file I shared with you by link. I'm going to give each group one of them. There's 8 total, and we only have 4 groups. So group 1, you can do number 1 and number 5. Group 2, you can do number 2 and number 6. Group 3, you can do numbers 3 and 7. And group 4, you can do number 4 and 8. If you don't see, I see it didn't copy and paste completely in this chat box. So I will go into each room and make sure you have it there. So if you finish early, feel free to go ahead and discuss other ones. I will give you a very short time. I'll give you 5 minutes. So please finish. Hello, welcome back. So I think everyone else will be joining us in about 5 seconds or so.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, welcome back. All right, so let me share with you my screen. And we'll quickly talk about what you thought. And anyone can answer. It doesn't have to be one your group was assigned. Does anyone want to share what they think is happening with this family of students who won't look at the teacher?
It's just a sign of respect, I think, that they won't look at the teacher because they consider her to be more superior to them, perhaps.
You are correct. Yes, in some cultures, making eye contact is considered respectful, and others, lowering your gaze is considered respectful. So the family's not meeting your eyes, don't worry. It's probably just they're showing you that they respect you. All right, now let's take a look at this one. This man wants to shake the woman's hand and she just doesn't put her hand out. What do you think could be happening here?
She's not comfortable.
Well, it's part of the culture, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, where the woman won't. So I think remember who said it in our group, but you know, culturally, you know, unmarried people touching hands would probably not be appropriate.
Right.
Yes, across genders, it can be considered taboo to make physical contact in many of our clients' cultures. Great. I'm going kind of fast because I want to make sure we get to the boundaries section. So if anyone wants to discuss these more in depth, I'll make time at the end. What do you think is going on with this one about pork?
Kosher and halal.
Right.
Yes, pork is a big one that many cultures avoid. Great. Okay, what about this one where the volunteer is sort of chasing the refugee around the airport? Slowly.
I would actually think this would be less common and we would be the reverse. Other cultures are much more close talkers than Americans are.
Yes, yeah, you're exactly right. This is about proximity. A lot of times, if the person wants to be closer or farther, can be related to if they grew up in a city in, you know, close quarters, or if they were from a more rural area. So if you notice they're coming close to you or they seem to be backing up, they might just have different levels of comfort with proximity. They might have a bigger or smaller bubble of personal space. Great. Okay. What about this one where the volunteers find a house they think is great? It's not the most beautiful, but the family declines to move into this house.
We thought it's probably, we have to be open-minded and listen to them because they probably have some reason that is legitimate, you know, from their perspective that we're just not thinking of. But we might need to also let them know this isn't permanent. This is enough to get started and try and work it out that way.
Perfect. Exactly right. In addition, some of the families may be coming from backgrounds where they were very wealthy. They may have had a very beautiful home at one point, and they may be disappointed to find that the house isn't what they were expecting. So managing expectations is an important thing that you mentioned. So great. Okay, what about this one where you ask, do you have any baggage? The refugee says, no, I don't. And then later he says, where's all my baggage? What do you think could be going on there?
Well, we talked about maybe a language barrier between baggage and luggage. And one of the things that, you know, we brought up was, is there something that they could be given or us be given ahead of time and saying, he left there, he's got 2 bags. Right. You know, they usually give you a bag tag on your ticket or your boarding pass, something that type of communication doesn't break down. So he knows what to expect when he arrives, right. But we know what to expect as well when he arrives, and what kind of clothes does he have on, what kind of clothes is he going to need based on the weather.
How much has he been informed, he or she been informed before they, you know, coming here? They may be a little more informed than we're thinking. It's just really, it's a touch and go. It's really something that I think it's really feeling what they're going through and finding we seem to have good alternatives to reach out to if we run into a problem. But I think the biggest thing is showing the calm and the comfort. You know, remember, like we've said, their familiarity is gone. Everything we give them in a sense of peace and kindness is really where they're going to respond. So I don't think, like Doug was saying, there's so many different ways between tags, putting on tickets, putting on the luggage. Some screen it, some don't. But we don't know, again, how much are they informed before they leave? You know, this is what you do. You have 2 bags. You have to do this or have to do that in their language. But, you know, the barrier being our ability to communicate with them. Yeah, we run into that, but I think you can only cover the bases so far. But I think what you're saying allows us to really open and see a very open view to what to expect. And I think we're confident enough, and they feel that from us. I think it's a positive, a win-win.
Yeah, great. Yeah, as you said, you can plan as the best possible way, and something could still get lost in translation. And this does actually happen pretty commonly. So we suggest, they often think we're asking about their carry-on and not the checked luggage.
Right.
So we often suggest clarifying that through the interpreter, or as an additional method, going to the baggage claim and just looking and see if they recognize any of the baggage as well.
Mhm.
And before we go to our next scenario, I just want to mention, if anyone had to leave right at 3:30, it's a little past 3:30, so we'll continue pretty quickly. If you have to go, no problem. This is all being recorded, so you'll be able to come and look back. So let's take a look at this scenario 7. The volunteers couldn't get an interpreter, but that's okay. They know he speaks a little English, so they explain everything. And then he says he understands, but later they hear that this man told his friends he doesn't know how to use anything in his home. What do you think could be happening here?
Well, there are some cultures that are just taught to avoid saying no.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a cultural issue.
Yes, good. And also they may be embarrassed to say they don't understand, or if they're really not understanding, they may just be nodding along to keep the speaker happy. So don't ever assume just because they say yes or okay that they understand. Make sure to use open-ended questions like, how do you use the stove? And have them explain back to you in their own words, using Google Translate if necessary. In this case, there was no interpreter, so they would have to plan to come back with an interpreter at a later time. They can't assume that it worked in just English. Okay, last cultural scenario. The women try to help this man get his many bags of suitcases to take to the car, and he says, no, very politely, but really doesn't want them to help. What do you think could be going on?
Also, the women don't do it.
Yes.
And
good.
women aren't supposed to do that.
Right.
Yes, you got it. One of our Afghan clients who spoke fluent English explained to me that it would be disrespectful of him to let me help. And so he was just trying to be respectful. So you may encounter this. It could happen in various cultures. So know that they most likely mean well and are just trying to be respectful. So great job with those cultural scenarios. Really quick before we finish, I'd like to just show you some suggested boundaries because boundaries can make for a healthy and happy relationship between the sponsors and the refugees that you sponsor. I'm also going to send you this entire packet as an attachment in the email. If you look, it's from a group called Citizens UK. I just took some screenshots to point out what I think are the most important points. So most important, some of you have already mentioned this, you are there to support the family and get them to become self-sufficient and independent. That may mean they make decisions that you wouldn't have made yourself or that you even disagree with, but it's important that you respect them and give them that room to grow and empower them. We do a lot ahead of time to make sure everyone will be safe. That being said, if you ever don't feel safe, feel free to leave that situation. This could even go down to the weather. If you're due to pick up a family at the airport, but it's icy, the weather's terrible, you don't feel safe driving, please don't drive. JFCS is there. We are always there as a backup for you. So don't put yourself into a situation where you feel in danger. We also recommend that when interacting with the family, that two people are always together. This is just for safety. And for example, if you had sponsored an individual woman and two men, or one man goes to the house alone, that could be very uncomfortable for her. So this will just help keep people feeling safe. We also recommend that you communicate with the family about boundaries. For example, you may want to say, please call me between the hours of 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. You could schedule whatever time. We don't want you to feel burnt out. So make sure you communicate with the family what you're comfortable with. And also make sure you ask the family what they're comfortable with. Don't just drop by uninvited. Give them notice that you'll be coming ahead of time. So first of all, so that you know they'll be there. Second of all, so they don't feel surprised or put upon. This is just saying don't go without letting them know ahead of time or without them saying it's okay. Some sponsors would like to invite the family they sponsor to their home for a meal, for example. We just recommend that you think carefully about this. If the family and your family have a pretty high level of a socioeconomic difference, it might make the sponsored family feel uncomfortable and could lead to difficult conversations. Be careful with gift giving. They may feel they need to reciprocate. Also compliments. If you say, I love your purse, the woman may think she now has to give you her purse because you like it. And in their culture, that would be the respectful thing to do. So just be careful with those things. And one of the most important things, photographs. Don't take a photo of the family unless you've received permission from the family first, and definitely don't share the photo on social media. Some families will be okay with that, but they would have to sign a release first. So,
do the people have our phone numbers?
That's a good question. Your group will decide whose phone numbers that they would like to share with the family. Normally that's the point people plus any others that it would be important for them to have. For example, if someone's driving them, they might share the driver's phone number with them so they can coordinate where to meet, for example. But you would decide as a group whose phone numbers you would share ahead of time.
Along those lines, will these people already have cell phones, or is that something that part of our group has to help them secure?
So what I think we will do, I'll give you two answers. Most of the clients from Afghanistan had phones because they were living on the US military bases. Most of the refugees not from Afghanistan did not have phones, or their phones don't work in the US, or their phones are pretty poor quality. So JFCS will use the funds from the reception and placement money from the government to be spent on the family's behalf to purchase them an affordable smartphone with an affordable unlimited monthly data plan. And it's a smartphone because the Google Maps feature is so valuable to help them learn to get around. And it's unlimited because the internet is so valuable to help them connect with resources and start to learn English and things of that nature. So JFCS will make sure they have a phone upon arrival. And we'll do that by actually buying a phone ahead of time. If they do, by an unusual chance, have a working phone and they don't need it, we could just return the phone we got or give it to the next person who arrives. So good question. Last one, confidentiality. At the end of the training, the third session, I'll send you a confidentiality form. Just be very careful not to share any personal information about the family to those outside of the group, including their names, for example, full names specifically. Great, so I'm going to stop sharing. That's the end of our third session, our third module, first session. Do you have any questions that I can answer?
Yeah, Elena, I have a question. When we when the family arrives, obviously the employable adults want to help them get a job. Excuse me. What is their employment status? Do they have a green card? They don't have a green card. What is their status?
So refugees are legally permitted to work as part of their refugee status. So they will receive documents eventually. They do not technically have to wait to receive those documents to begin working. However, most employers like to have the documents. So you might find that they end up waiting for them, even though they're legally. And it can take varying amounts of time for the documents to arrive.
Do you get them state IDs or before they get driver's license?
Yes, JFCS will help them get a state ID. Excuse me. They could get a driver's license if they go through the whole regular process, but that doesn't often happen, usually due to the language barrier. But there are some clients who have gotten driver's licenses pretty quickly upon arrival.
Will they also need a social security card before they're employed?
They will need it. And right now, they should all have the application for the social security number completed on their behalf before they arrive. So they should, without us having to do anything, receive it within about 2 weeks of arrival. That being said, sometimes they get delayed, so it can be hard to predict exactly when it would arrive.
You said at the beginning, and we all realize we need to do these clearances. That's a given. And I think it was stated somewhere along the line that the training that we're doing today in the next 2 weeks is also required in certain cases. Is it required of us all? I mean, those that can't make it today, they'll be able to see it offline. And we took attendance today, by the way, just to let everybody know. So we know who was on this call. Can you answer that? Is the training firmly required or is it optional? How does that work?
It is required. And if someone joined the group later, they could still watch the recordings even at a later date, and that would still suffice for the training requirement. There are a few exceptions. For example, if you have children and you want your children to play with the refugee family's children, they would not need to complete the training. That would be fine for them to do without the training. Or if there was someone who wanted to help the group but not be directly involved with the family, including not knowing the confidential information about the family, like someone who wanted to donate furniture, and that would be the extent of their support, they wouldn't have to. We had in the other group some people who wanted to knit blankets and write immigration stories from their own families and give those, and they did not attend the training. But it's important to remember, even if those people are supporting the family outside of directly interacting with them, that we still can't share information about the family with them unless they've completed the training.
I have a question. A very important and useful strategy for teaching English as a second language is to use pictures. So a lot of this miscommunication can be bypassed by utilizing pictures. Is there a curricula or supplement or something that you recommend or have that we can start out if we have to communicate with these people, that we have pictures in our pocket?
Yes. So for the core services, it's required. It's a mandated requirement that there be an interpreter present or on the phone for things like the airport pickup. But if you're trying to teach the family how to speak English as a second language, then definitely there's curriculum we can recommend. The cultural orientations have mandated topics. An interpreter must be there for those mandated topics. But for the topics that aren't mandated, yet still very important, then using pictures would be very important. And we do have, I'll share this with you in an email, it's an app called Settle In, and they have many different languages, and it is the basics of how to adjust to life in the US in all these different languages. And it includes videos, lots of photos, audio, as well as the written portion in the other languages. It's very helpful. It includes the mandated cultural orientation information as well. We still would have to go through those cultural orientations in a session with the clients ourselves, but that could be a backup and a reminder for them. That's it. That's a good question.
Question, when you're talking about the cultural orientation and all the different scenarios that we went through of awkward situations where there were like misinterpretations of cultural differences, once a client or client family is assigned to us, will there be some resources available to us to help us to understand those things, like Afghan culture for dummies or something like that, so that we can sort of, you know, get a little bit of a precursor to what's expected of us, so that we don't, you know, trip over our own feet when we're trying to be helpful?
Yes, absolutely. So some of the national organizations that help with the cultural orientations for resettlement have created what they call backgrounders on the countries that are common. And I can share those with you. They're pretty long. At this point, you might not want to start reading them all because we don't know where your family would be from. But it gives really helpful information on their culture. Also, ideally, whatever language that the family spoke, we would try our best to find a local interpreter. JFCS has a list of interpreters that contract with us, and if the interpreter was willing, we would share their information with you, so you could also contract with them. And the interpreters are usually very happy to share helpful information about the culture. It's not always, they might not necessarily be from the same country, but they most likely, even if they weren't, would be able to share some cultural information.
So I also wonder about, like, do they expect you to just get them things? Like, and I'm thinking, if somebody told me that they enjoyed sewing their clothes or that they were used to making their own clothes, if you have an extra sewing machine, do you give it to them, or is that dangerous? If somebody gets hurt, is it our fault? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know what the logistical, you know, can you give them a sewing machine, or can you, you know, it just, it's a silly question, but there's probably a zillion things that they may ask you to try to help them get. How far do you go?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it could be for something even like a bicycle. Like, yes, you could give them a bicycle, but what if they get hit? So
right. Exactly.
So first, you would just decide, does your group as a whole have the capacity to give them the item? And if so, does your group have the capacity to teach them how to use the item safely? And that would most likely mean using the interpreter for that. If they already know how to ride a bike safely or use the sewing machine safely, you would just need to confirm that with the interpreter, ask the client to explain to you the safety rules they already know, so you could be assured they really do know it, especially for the bike in the US, the laws are different. So if you decide it's safe, or as safe as possible, because they do have agency, they can make these decisions for themselves, you could definitely go ahead and do it. If you were worried about them asking for too much, you could always say, I'm not sure, let me ask JFCS. And that way it's not on you as an individual. Or you could say, let me ask the leader of our sponsorship group. for example. That way they know they can't just ask you again and again. It's not your decision alone.
Right. Not that I mind giving them things, but I mean, it just is a function of, you don't want to make it awkward for anyone. And I think that's good to know. So
sure. Yeah. All right. Well, if anyone thinks of questions later on, feel free to ask at the next session, or you can email your point people. They can pass it on to me as well. I will be following up with your point people with a PDF of that document I shared in the link, as well as some additional links like to the boundaries PDF. That should help you. And the link for the Settle In app.
And when will we have the recordings of this session if we want to go back and review a particular part?
They should be. That's a good question. I usually send it the next day or in the evening, but I think they're available pretty quickly. So you should be getting it very, very soon. I would say tonight or tomorrow at the latest.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a question for Bobby Hartman. Bobby, what was the name of that book?
Oh, it's called the Poisonwood Bible.
Poisonwood Bible.
Yes, and it is Barbara Kingsolver. It's not new. I don't know how long I've had this, but it's really interesting for people who are going into different cultures, particularly when we think we know what we're doing.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's I think 1999, so it's been around a while.
And who was the author, Bobby?
Barbara Kingsolver.
Okay.
Kingsolver.
Okay.
Alina, it's Fred Zell. I have a question that doesn't really relate to Westminster, but about refugees. Would you mind hanging on for a minute at the end?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Happy to.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. Well, it seems like most of the questions are coming to an end. So I just want to thank everyone for attending, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again next Sunday. Same time, same Zoom link.
Hey, very well done, Elena. Thank you. They're really, really good.
Nice job.
Really, really good. Nice job.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. And Fred, I'm going to stop recording.